Hi, I'm Yuri, and in this presentation, we'll see a famous scarecrow character in Chinese children's literature, the Scarecrow by Ye Shengtao, in comparison with the Scarecrow in The Wizard of Oz, to see different roles of the scarecrow and the purpose behind it. If in The Wizard of Oz, the scarecrow is more like a representative of farmer, then in the Scarecrow by Ye Shengtao, it's more like an observer. Compared to the Western scarecrow, the characterization in Ye's version is more focused on its heart, the feature endowed to the Tin Man, than the brain. The character is more passive, unable to offer actual help, and thus the atmosphere in this book is more bleak and oppressive, with a purpose to mirror the real life. As a pioneer of children's literature, Ye Shentao writes with his own vision and stylistic feature. He has three main educational and journalistic ideologies. First, the goal of education is not to educate, which means students should not be taught the detailed content, but the method to learn. And second, literature is for life. He is passionate in reflecting the real life in his words, and this is one big feature in The Scarecrow. He feels obliged to let the reader know what was actually happening around even little readers, so it can arouse the youngest awareness and responsibilities towards the society. And third one is readability. First as a teacher, then an editor, Ye Shentao thinks his writing is for the reader as a means of communication between readers and authors. And in children's literature, Ye's first academic essay was about children's literature called Children's Concept, criticizing how feudalism affected children's lives in China. And second, he promotes such a mind training for the young. He believed that children should have an understanding of their surrounding so as to enhance their critical power. Through Ye's stories, children could gradually acquire a clear picture of society and their relationships with it. The story Scarecrow is about rural life. Modern industries just arose, hence the labor force was unfairly treated and the rural people did their utmost to struggle out of coldness and starvation. And it happens around the May 4th movement. The youth paid more attention to the national rejuvenation and socially dynamic states, could not help caring about the suffering of the common people and actively participating in the For the People. And also in the 1920s, something great took place in Chinese literature. Chinese literature entered in a new stage. The new literature and the vernacular works provided the support of the rising of Chinese fairy tales. In old China, as for the character of Scarecrow, in order to scare away sparrows, farmers made scarecrows and put them in the paddy field, where many miseries took place, witnessed by nobody but the Scarecrow. The story, The Scarecrow, presents three bitter scenes in the field in nighttime. First story is about the old woman and the youth, and the moth. An old poverty-stricken woman who created the Scarecrow. Her husband and son both died. A moth stopped in the field and laid eggs on the paddy leaf. The Scarecrow failed to help her to get rid of the disaster of the moth's eggs, despite his effort to stand straight and fan away the moth. And several days later, the eggs turned into great amounts of moss, and the harvest of the old woman came to nothing. Second story is what the Scarecrow saw about a fisherwoman, her sick child, and the fish in the bucket. The fisherwoman was casting her net into the river while her child coughed now and then, trying and pledging for waters. The woman is tired and the child is sick and thirsty, and even the fish in the bucket is in desperation, begging the Scarecrow to help it. Third story is about a drowning woman. Another woman's drowning because she refused to be sold to another family for money so that her father could continue to gamble. The Scarecrow passed out for these devastating scenes because he is unable to stop all of them. And the next day he was seen lying flat in the field with all his self-reproach for his impotence. Ye Shengtao was apparently influenced by his Western counterpart, Oscar Wilde, and the Happy Prince. He once wrote, "I wrote fairy tales. which had certainly received the Western influence. Around the May 4th movement, the fairy tales by Grimm, Anderson, and Wilde were introduced to China in succession. As an elementary school teacher then, I would of course pay attention to this form of literature suitable for children's reading, and thus I had the idea of attempting it by myself. Now let's have a close comparison between the Scarecrow and Wizard of Oz to find out some similarities as well as differences. The first similarity is that they are created by others, and both the story emphasize this. In Wizard of Oz, the Scarecrow told the process how he is made. First the air, then the ice. He said, I had the fun of watching them make my body and my arms and legs, and when they fastened on my head, at last I felt very proud, for I thought I was just as good a man as anyone. And in the Scarecrow, this feature is also being emphasized. Ye Shengtao wrote, Christians believe that man was created by God. We can borrow this idea, despite its validity, to say the Scarecrow is created by the farmer. Here, we can see the story the story builds a close correspondence between God and human and the Scarecrow. Human's position turns from object to subject with his own creativity. By doing so, it naturally personalizes the Scarecrow and increases identification of little readers, so that it makes it easier for the story to evoke their empathy and sympathy. The second similarity is that they're not just what they are. The Scarecrow is not just an object that the farmers made to scare the crow and the sparrows. In The Wizard of Oz, the Scarecrow represents the farmer, helpless without brains, so that he cannot find his own interests, but also takes place in being a scarecrow. With the Tin Man and the Cowardly Lion together, it makes up the American society during the time period of the late 18th and early 19th. While in Ye Shengtao's Scarecrow, the Scarecrow is more like an observer and a representative of the good people in the old days. They are compassionate, but also they are weak. They're not masters of their fate, but just at the mercy of the indifferent forces that manipulate their behavior. The third similarity is that they're both positive and kind character. In The Wizard of Oz, the Scarecrow is apparently very helpful. He first points the way for Dorothy, and he decides to go with her and tells her story and protect her. While in the Scarecrow, in the first scene, the Scarecrow worked hard to frighten the moths so the old woman can have a promising harvest. And in the second scene, he wanted to make tea and give warmth to the sick child, and he wants to help the fish. In the third scene, he tried to stop the drowning of the forsaken woman. So here we can see a sharp comparison between the dark society and the brightness of the Scarecrow. Then comes to the difference. The first difference is the initiative. In The Wizard of Oz, the Scarecrow could take the initiative, and he even represents the hero archetype. Towards the end of the story, he sneaks into the Wicked Witch's castle to rescue Dorothy and help her when she is captured by the Wicked Witch of the West. But in the Scarecrow cannot move, for he is stuck in the field in face of the sufferings around him. He is thus denied even the luxury of charity. The second difference is on the different focus, one on brain and one on heart. In The Wizard of Oz, we can see the Scarecrow cries for a brain. You see, I'm starved, so I have no brains at all, he answers sadly. But the irony here is also created. First is that to be aware that you have no brain is a proof that you do have a brain, because one needs to be smart enough to realize one's flaw and weakness. And also it's ironic how the Scarecrow wanted a brain when he was really the smartest character in the whole story to solve the crisis. But perhaps this is the point of the story. The characters always had what they wanted. They just had to search inside to find and recognize them. While in the Scarecrow, it is more committed to the heart. We can see the fish's comment on the Scarecrow when the Scarecrow failed to help it despite its begging. The fish said, "It's not difficult at all. You have no human heart, and all you know is shake your head." So here, he does have a heart, but he's just unable to make such awareness into action. The irony we can also see is one is condemned to cold-hearted, even with a good intention. So back to the story, it reflects realistic portrayal of the suffering of the rural life, especially for the peasants, women, children, and the old from the lower social class. So the whole story is permeated with certain sadness, melancholy, and depression to reveal the cruelty of reality, and thus it serves as an accusation of the old society at that time. But one problem is, will it be too cruel for the children? And here I can think of two of the reasons why Ye Shengtao tried to create and mold his story in this form. First is that because in the preface of the English edition of the Scarecrow, Ye Shengtao said, "My intention was to call upon children to take an interest in real life and be attentive to things around them." So one reason is that because Ye Shengtao sees children as both miniature adult and a unique individual different from adults. Because children are miniature adult, so he raises them as miniature adult, exposing them to reality to promote their critical thinking. But different from adults because he trusts, we can see this story shows a strong trust in children's compassionate nature. They are compassionate, so these stories can better resonate with them. And we can see from this story, the fairy tales in China and in Western countries serve different functions. The function of the fairy tale, the Scarecrow, is not just for entertainment or even not just for education, but a means of social criticism and a rejection of the elite nature of previous Confucian literature. And that's all for this presentation. Thank you.